Mark chapter 10, verses 13 through 16. This is one of my favorite passages in all of. I love this passage. In fact, this morning, as I was finishing writing out my message, I actually spent time taking stuff off of it because there's just so much. This is just one of those passages for me that's just super foundational. The passage we're going to go through next week is also super foundational for me. The story of the rich young ruler, the rich young man. I'm excited about that one as well. And these verses right here, though, are a big deal to me. And so we're gonna jump right into them and see if God can teach us some stuff. And maybe this will all be just reminders, or maybe it'll be some new stuff. But either way, hopefully God does good work in our hearts tonight. So Mark chapter 10, verses 13 through 16 says this: "And they were bringing children to him that he might touch them, and the disciples rebuked them. But when Jesus saw it, he was indignant, and said to them, 'Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it.' And he took them in his arms and blessed them, laying his hands on them." Okay, we're just going to go through these few verses tonight and think through them together. The first verse, verse 13, "And they were bringing children to him that he might touch them." What that means by touch them is to bless them. This is like a pretty traditional Jewish thing, and now it's a traditional Christian thing to do. You bring a child to a teacher, to a pastor, and he blesses them. Back in the day, it was to a priest, and then they recognized Jesus as a great spiritual leader, and they wanted his blessing on them, and maybe some of them recognized him as the Son of God. And so these were adults bringing their own children that they cared about to Jesus for a blessing. This is a pretty traditional thing. When Luke talks about this story, he calls these children infants. And so we know we're talking with young. These are really young children here. These are babies or toddlers. These are 2-3-year-olds at the most probably. Some of them could be a little older, but they're ones that Jesus can pick up in his arms. The language is pretty clear here. These are little children. Okay, this isn't like a 12-year-old. This is a little child, and the disciples are, the language is interesting in this verse. I think it's kind of funny. The disciples rebuked them, but the way it's worded here, it's almost as if the people are bringing their children, the disciples are rebuking them, but the people are still bringing their children. It's like the disciples aren't stopping anything from happening here. They're just out there rebuking people. The way the language is set up here, and it's. I guess we can probably understand why the disciples would be rebuking these people, turning these people away. It's possible that they wanted to protect Jesus. They wanted to protect his time. They knew Jesus had things to do. He had big important things to teach people. He had devils to cast out, and he had adults to heal, and he had all this work. He had this big kingdom work to do. And so to be bothered with children, especially these little 1-2-year-olds, maybe they couldn't even talk. Maybe we have a situation here where Jesus can just kind of pass some of this stuff off, or move the kids along or something like that. And so maybe the disciples are trying to kind of guard Jesus' time. It's also possible that their motives were less pure than that, because this story comes in the midst of a bunch of stories with the disciples arguing about who's the best. The disciples were always arguing about who's the greatest. And they thought of greatness as having a lot of influence and leading a whole bunch of big adults, and that what they think of as greatness doesn't match up with serving a whole bunch of small children. You know that in their mind, this doesn't. And especially John, just a few verses earlier, was worried because other people were casting out demons, and he in his group wasn't casting out demons. And so you kind of get this idea that they're probably probably looking to protect Jesus' time, but they're probably looking to protect their own reputation too. They don't want to be seen as the group who messes around with kids, we give stickers and gumdrops out, and we're good to kids, and 2-year-olds love it. Well, we don't want to be that group. We want to be the group that's leading a big group of adults. We have big conversations, and we have a big following. They wanted something more reputable. They want it to be more. They want to be more influential. Probably is what's happening here. Maybe a little bit of both. And so they're protecting themselves, protecting Christ, probably his priorities, their own reputation, and but their priorities are all messed up here. They're all out of whack. And Jesus makes that super clear in verse 14. But when Jesus saw it, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the children come to me, do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God." Now this word indignant there we might not think of it as strongly as what the original languages want us to think of it as. Indignant meant Jesus was very, very grieved. He was much grieved, literally, is what that word means. And what he's doing here is he's revealing a little bit of his heart. When we become very angry, very, very grieved about something, when something bothers us emotionally, it kind of shows what's super close to our heart, and what kind of things we treasure, and what kind of things we prize, and what we see as important, and what we value. And it was pretty clear here that Jesus values his time blessing these children. He values this time with these little infants and these 2-year-olds and these 3-year-olds crawling up on his lap and him talking, 2-year-old nonsense with him. He values this time. For whatever reasons, Jesus values children. It's a big deal to him. And so when he sees his disciples rebuking these people for bringing their children, he is very, very grieved about this. He becomes very indignant, and he begins to rebuke them. He begins to rebuke them, and he says, "Let the children come to me. Do not hinder them." And then he says, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Now, at the end, we're going to come back to this idea of let the children come to me and do not hinder them. But first, we're going to think about what does "for to such belongs the kingdom of God" mean. Well, I think verse 15 helps us kind of figure out what is he saying when he's talking about children. He says, "For to such belongs the kingdom of God." What does that mean exactly? Verse 15 helps us, and it says, "Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it." Verse 15 says, again, "Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it." He's saying the people who enter the kingdom of God enter like children. This does not mean that children are super humble. It doesn't even mean, as some people say, that they have great faith. What it means, what it's referring to, is the thing that all children have in common, whether they know it or not. All children are helplessly dependent. Yeah. All children are helplessly dependent. In Matthew 18, Jesus says very clearly, if you're going to enter the kingdom of God, you have to make yourself like a child. You make yourself like a child. And so these are adults, and they're thinking, I have to be as helplessly dependent as a child if I'm going to enter the kingdom of God. And when Jesus talks about people entering the kingdom of God as a child, this is what he's referring to. He's referring to the fact that children willingly accept things they'd never be able to get on their own. They'd never be able to get, there's a whole bunch of things children can't get on their own. They can't do for themselves. They would run out of food very quickly. They would run out of clothes very quickly. They wouldn't be able to find a place for themselves to stay if adults didn't help them. They would have trouble with shelter and with health and with hygiene and with nourishment. Children are helplessly dependent. A 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, my 1-year-old, she's absolutely adorable, but those good looks will get her nowhere during a Massachusetts winter. That's we're not going to set her outside and see how her cuteness, if that fends off the bad weather and fends off the storm. No, children are helplessly dependent.